Tonight, Liberal minority Canadians shake up their political map after an election for the ages.
We were heading for an electoral defeat.
A rare 4 in a row, led this time by a newcomer. Up next for Prime Minister Mark Carney, affordability, unity, and Donald Trump.
It is a time to be bold, to meet this crisis with overwhelming positive force of a united Canada.
The Conservatives were so close, a historically high vote share, yet so far, their popular leader losing his own seat.
I think he absolutely must stay on as our leader.
The vote exposed a deep red-blue divide as the Bloc sagged and the NDP cratered.
Because if you are fighting against something and you're not fighting for something, you end up losing everything.
So the verdict is in. The challenge is immense and Canadians are engaged.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrienne Arsenault.
Thank you for joining us. In an election that was already remarkable in so many ways, it is perhaps fitting that it took nearly a full extra day for Canadians to get an answer. But tonight, there is clarity on the makeup of Canada's next parliament. The CBC News decision desk predicts the Liberals have won a minority. So this is what the electoral map looks like tonight. The Liberals falling just short of the 172 seats needed to form a majority. Some of the races contested tightly right down to the wire. A couple decided by just a handful of votes. But Canadians delivered a major political shakeup. The Conservatives made big wins, even as Pierre Poilievre lost his own seat. So did Jagmeet Singh as the NDP vote collapsed. Mark Carney did keep his job and is wasting no time getting on with it, with the U.S. trade war well underway and worried Canadians searching for solutions. We are diving into it all tonight, from the suspense to the surprises to what happens now. And as we do, I want to draw your attention to the numbers on the bottom of the screen. That is where the results stand. So let's kick things off with Ashley Burke, who's in Ottawa. Ashley, you have been following the Liberals.
Adrienne, Mark Carney campaigned until the last minute, asking for a strong mandate to take on Donald Trump. He got one, but it's projected to be a strong minority, falling short by only a few seats.
After a late night celebrating a victory that seemed unimaginable just months ago, the now elected Prime Minister got to work.
Bonjour, Monsieur Carney.
On day one, Mark Carney spoke to Donald Trump. His office says the U.S. president congratulated him and they agreed to meet.
Who's ready to stand up for Canada with me?
Carney focused his campaign around Trump's threat to Canada and won the most seats but fell short of a majority government.
It is a time to be bold, to meet this crisis with overwhelming positive force of a united Canada. Because we are going to build, baby, build.
A stunning reversal of fortunes.
We were heading for an electoral defeat. I had assumed that I would be serving as a member of the opposition. To be able to come back from that and to win a fourth consecutive government.
Thank you. Thank you.
Another huge victory for the Liberals was the election of Bruce Vanjoy.
It's a remarkable story, this race in Carleton.
500 volunteers helped him beat Pierre Poilievre, unseating the Conservative leader who held the riding for 20 years. Vanjoy says Trump completely changed the race for voters.
They recognized that we faced this threat and focused on who is best able to lead Canada.
In this moment, the Liberals could turn to other parties for support or try to cobble together a majority by urging NDP members to join their party.
We like majorities because they're neat and tidy, but this is a very strong minority by any account. So the Liberals absolutely can govern in this circumstance.
Next, Carney will have to choose a cabinet, likely in the next few weeks. Parliament is scheduled to return on May 26th, but that's not set in stone.
And Ashley, what more do we know about Carney's call with Trump?
Adrienne, the Prime Minister's office says that both leaders agreed on the importance of working together as independent sovereign nations and said they'd meet in the near future, but didn't share exactly when that will be.
All right, Ashley Burke in Ottawa. Now, for the Conservatives, the post-election picture is decidedly mixed. So here with more on why is Kate McKenna.
Adrian, as you heard, election night held one last surprise. Pierre Poilievre lost the Ottawa area riding he'd held for more than 20 years. After losing his seat, Pierre Poilievre won't be returning to the House of Commons for now, but he says he wants to keep his job.
Our Conservative caucus and I will be holding the government to account on behalf of the millions of Canadians who believed in the message of change.
Poilievre's Conservatives made significant gains, getting the biggest share of the popular vote in the history of the modern party formed in 2003. But it wasn't enough, thanks in part to the collapse of the NDP.
We have to learn the lessons of tonight so that we can have an even better result the next time the Canadians decide the future for the country.
I think Pierre still very much enjoys the broad, deep support of Conservative Party members to stay on. And I don't think there's going to be a move in that caucus to quickly oust him like you saw with Aaron O'Toole.
Some MPs are already standing behind their leader. Former party leader Andrew Scheer posted on social media saying Poilievre's continued leadership will ensure we finish the job next time.
He's absolutely earned the right to take a moment to sort out what happens next. I think he absolutely must stay on as our leader. Pierre has been, I think, one of the most effective leaders of the opposition in generations.
But the road ahead could be bumpy. On election night, Conservative MP Jamil Javani ripped into doubters among the Ontario Progressive Conservatives, including the Premier.
I see Doug Ford as a problem for Ontario and for Canada. When it was our turn to run an election, he couldn't stay out of our business, always getting his criticisms and all his opinions out, distracting our campaign.
Doug Ford brushed off that criticism.
Anyways, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about Ontario.
But he didn't endorse Poilievre to stay on as leader.
That's going to be up to Pierre Poilievre. It's going to be up to the federal party. I'm focused on Ontario.
4 months ago, it looked like Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives would cruise to a massive majority government. Critics are quick to note his party blew a 20-point lead.
So, Kate, this matter of having no seat, how long does that last?
Well, the party hasn't shared any official plan, but he'll need to win a by-election to get back into the House of Commons, and that could take months. Without a seat, opposing the government will come with challenges, and if the Liberals are able to convince opposition MPs to cross the floor and help form a majority, that would put more pressure on Poilievre's leadership.
All right, that is Kate McKenna in Ottawa. David Cochrane, host of Power and Politics, is still here with me now. David, people always say every vote counts, but clearly today we were waiting on every vote to literally be counted in some ridings.
Yeah, look, this map is all filled in and color-coded, and it's nice and stable now. But last night, Adrian, it was taking some big swings, and this was because so many advance votes were coming in so late in the night, and they were having these profound effects on ridings. You get a BC riding where the Conservatives are up by 900 votes, an advance poll will come in, and suddenly, oh, it's an 1,100-vote Liberal lead. So you had swings of 2,000 votes based on just a couple of advance polls. There was just too much volatility with too much vote to count to make the call last night. So we waited. We waited until today, and we started the day with 11 seats across the country where the Liberals were in second place, and there was a chance to give them the flips they needed to get the 4 more seats to get to that 172 mark for the majority. Now, it started off okay, and we're going to go over to Quebec for that, because here in Quebec, there was a seat near the island, just off the island of Montreal, the riding of Terrebonne. And we started today with the Bloc Québécois ahead by about 28 votes with 1 poll left to report. And when that poll came in, this turned into a Liberal seat. You can see there the lead is still very narrow. It is just 35 votes, which means this is a fragile lead, and this will be going to an automatic recount. But at least it's a lead. This moved the seat count up to 169 for the Liberals. They got similar good news out here in Newfoundland and Labrador, where we started the night first in Terra Nova and the Peninsulas, where the Liberal had a narrow lead, a special ballot had to come in. The opposite was true here. This might favor the Conservatives. So the results came in for Terra Nova and the Peninsulas, and Anthony Germain, the Liberal candidate, former CBC broadcaster, he won by 12 votes. I think that's the tightest race in the country. That one is also going to go to an automatic recount. So those are the 2 bits of good news. But as we went through those other 11 seats, a bloc seat in Quebec, stayed bloc. Seats in Kitchener, in Milton, in Hamilton and Ontario, in Kildonan and St. Paul and Winnipeg, and here on the lower mainland of British Columbia, 3 seats that might have done the trick for the Liberals. None of them flipped. They got Terrebonne, they held on to Terra Nova St. Paul, and that left them, Terra Nova and the peninsulas, and that left them stuck 3 short of a majority.
So, David, lots of blue on that map.
Yep.
Are there some specific places you can point to beyond the ones you just talked about where the Liberals' hopes of a majority totally fall apart?
Yeah, look, it's not the Atlantic. They gained there. It's not Quebec. They gained big there. And it's not British Columbia. They're up 6 there. The failure really comes down to Ontario and one specific region, which is where they're usually so strong, and that's the Greater Toronto Area. This has been the Liberal fortress for years. You can see a lot of blue here in Peel region and in York region and pushing into the city of Toronto itself. This is what it looked like last time, Adrian. A lot more red. You know, after last night and today, you got some blue there. The health minister lost her seat. Another former cabinet minister lost their seat. They lost seats in Ontario. If the Liberals had just held what they had coming into this election, it's a majority government for Mark Carney today, but they failed in the biggest province, the one where they held a lot of seats and lost them by the end of the night.
Okay, David, as always, thanks for your analysis. That's David Cochrane.
Thank you.
You can see here that the Liberals and Conservatives both made gains at the expense of other parties. The NDP's drop from 24 seats to 7 has cost it official party status. Leader Jagmeet Singh acknowledged that as he announced he is stepping down. Cameron McIntosh has been chasing down what happens next. So, Cam, how bad do things look tonight for the NDP?
Well, Adrian, losing official party status means the party won't have the same privileges in Parliament that it had before. It also won't qualify for expense rebates other parties will get. All as a big question overshadows everything. What is the future of the New Democratic Party? One last cheer from his staff, Jagmeet Singh flying back to Ottawa, soon to be the former NDP leader.
I'll be stepping down as party leader as soon as an interim leader can be appointed.
Last night's result reduced the NDP seat count from 24 to 7. Singh struggled all campaign as polls showed NDP support bleeding to Mark Carney's Liberals, who many progressives saw as a better alternative to Pierre Poilievre and better suited to deal with U.S. President Donald Trump.
I think NDP supporters lent their votes to Mark Carney and the Liberals. I don't think that they did it with any sense of joy.
If you are fighting against something and you're not fighting for something, you end up losing everything.
This former NDP strategist says Singh gave those voters permission when he didn't take down the Trudeau Liberals last fall.
The voters heard him loud and clear. We have to do everything to stop the Conservatives. So they did, and the NDP paid the price.
The NDP also bled blue-collar support to Conservatives in Ontario, posing some big identity questions.
Do we want to not fight for those voters anymore? We have to speak to their issues.
All issues for the next leader, who will hold the balance of power in Parliament, but lack the resources and influence that comes with official party status. Yes! Montreal MP Alexandre Boulerice, now Eastern Canada's only sitting New Democrat, told Radio-Canada he's interested in serving in the interim. As for a permanent leader, there really is no heir apparent.
I don't have any interest in that job.
BC's NDP premier not biting, but wished his federal cousins well. All of it pointing to a tough rebuild for those who did win.
Certainly we have to take some time and reflect on how we need to rebuild as a party.
A huge part of the next few weeks will be to have some difficult discussions with my fellow caucus members.
And a big part of that is just figuring out what the NDP is right now.
And what about Jagmeet Singh? It was so interesting last night to see him just say, that's it, he was done so quickly. What are people now saying about his legacy?
Well, on one hand, Singh is leaving his job as leader, having led the NDP in 3 elections, each time getting a worse result. Still, some say he may go down as one of the NDP's most consequential leaders after forcing the Trudeau Liberals to implement national dental and pharmacare plans through that confidence and supply agreement they had. The problem is, Singh never really got any political credit and now is out of politics. Adrian?
All right, Cameron McIntosh, thank you. And Lucky Meek is here with me now, our chief political correspondent, Rosie Barton. So, Rosie, Mark Carney And the Liberals obviously came away as winners, but as they always say, now the real work begins.
It for sure does, Adrian. His immediate challenge is how quickly can he get this government up and running, forming a new cabinet, getting Parliament back, a throne speech, outlining his plans for the country. Leading a minority government as a first-time prime minister with an aggressive agenda is also a real challenge. Perhaps the good news for Carney here is that all parties need a little bit of time to regroup, and that makes it less likely the government will fall anytime soon. He has signaled a desire for unity and collaboration. He reached out to opposition leaders today directly. The other much bigger challenge, obviously, is Donald Trump's tariffs and his threatening rhetoric. And this is an issue the Prime Minister has thought a lot more about. But he's also raised expectations on this front by saying he wants to negotiate a new deal with the U.S. president. Now he has the title, he's got the mandate, and he's going to have to start demonstrating to Canadians that he does, in fact, know how to do this.
And I suppose Pierre Poilievre has some things to demonstrate, too.
He sure does. First and foremost, it's this issue of not having a seat in Parliament, which was, I think, a surprising development for most of us. Pierre Poilievre made it clear last night he wants to continue to lead the party. He may have to find an MP willing to step aside for a by-election. The second challenge is holding on to his leadership after months of leading a caucus that really thought it was going to form government and now finds itself in opposition yet again. He can point to increased seat count, incredibly strong popular vote, and even, because of this remarkable success in Ontario, as you know, a broadening of the Conservative coalition right across the country. But he's going to have to show some ability to work with the Liberal government when needed, particularly in the face of those threats from the United States. So challenges for everyone.
Yeah, the months ahead are sure going to be interesting. All right, thank you, Rosie. And Rosemary will be back in about 20 minutes for a deeper dive on the results with the At Issue panel. Now, Elections Canada says this year's voter turnout was the highest since 2015. We're talking about more than 19.5 million people who cast a ballot. That represents more than 68% of eligible voters across the country, almost 5 percentage points higher than the last federal election. Now, millions of those votes went to the Conservative Party, many in Western Canada. Julia Wong has a reaction from Alberta, where voters are taking in another federal Liberal win.
At this rural Alberta diner, a Liberal government isn't what some voters ordered, but they hope it will consider their hopes for their province.
I want it to be listened to and that people here matter and what our livelihoods are staked on here. If they listen, treat us fairly, like treat Alberta fairly.
Well, it'd be nice if there was a greater degree of respect for our ownership of the resource and the development of the resource.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith agrees, calling for changes to energy policies.
These are kind of the baseline to reset the relationship with Alberta.
The Conservatives dominated the vote here, but the Liberals did capture 2 seats and won more than 28% of the popular vote. Still, Western alienation has been simmering for years. This election brought it again to the surface. Smith says her government won't put forward a referendum on Alberta leaving Canada.
I'm pleased to rise and move first reading of Bill 54.
But new legislation tabled Tuesday loosened the rules for one to happen.
They're going to be organizing over the next little while.
Polling suggests the vast majority of Albertans do not want to separate from Canada, but this man wants to put it on the ballot.
So just like Quebec's referendum in 1994 and 95, all that stuff is simply, or like Brexit. Brexit would be another good example, a successful example actually, of do you want to remain in Canada or do you want to leave?
During the election, former Reform Party leader Preston Manning said a vote for the Liberals is a vote for Western secession. In a statement Tuesday, Manning says talks are in the works to form next steps, including what he called independence-oriented proposals. Prime Minister Mark Carney admits it's tough to be a Liberal in the prairies, but says he intends to govern for all Canadians. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
Some of Canada's closest allies are congratulating Mark Carney on his victory. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer referenced Carney's time as the governor of the Bank of England, saying, "With your leadership and personal ties to the UK, I know the relationship between our two countries will continue to grow." French President Emmanuel Macron gave a nod to Carney's elbows up battle cry, saying, "I'm looking forward to working with you, elbow to elbow." Well, Donald Trump's presidency cast a long shadow over this election, and today marks 100 days since he took office. How Trump's tariffs are being received in the heart of the U.S. auto sector, even as he walks some of those tariffs back. Plus,
their entire family just passed away.
The impossibly hard losses of the Vancouver festival attack. That's next. The city of Vancouver continues to come to grips with the horror of Saturday night, a vehicle attack at a Filipino street festival that killed 11 people. Lindsay Duncombe has the details.
Haunted, sleepless, Chris Nadalo came to the memorial to escape memories of what he witnessed Saturday night.
People are screaming and they're asking for help. It was so sad for me. That's why I came back.
Nadalo was at the Lapu-Lapu Day Filipino Street Festival when a man drove an SUV into the crowd, killing 11. Now he's finding comfort from strangers.
I really appreciate it that lots of people is so kind and comfort you.
Kindness is pouring in. So far, more than $1 million has been donated online for victims, including for the Samper family, originally from Colombia. Mother, father, daughter, all killed. Then there's Katie Lee, just 5 years old. She died in hospital. Her mother and father died too, leaving behind their 16-year-old son, who stayed home that day.
Their entire family just passed away.
Katie's uncle, Tone Lee, says the family received so many donations, they plan to give more than $200,000 to other victims.
What I've sort of taken out of this is that a lot of people want to help.
Matt Watkins' wife remains in hospital. She has broken bones and deep cuts. His 11-year-old was also hurt, but will be okay. Watkins is thinking about the driver of the vehicle.
I feel empathetic towards him.
Kai G. Adam Lowe is facing 8 charges of second-degree murder and more are expected. BC's health ministry said Lowe was under supervision by a mental health care team and followed closely. It said there was no indication of violence, adding there was no recent change in his condition or non-compliance with his treatment plan that would have warranted him needing to be hospitalized involuntarily.
I consider him a victim in this whole thing as well. He didn't have the support that he needed. I hope that he gets the help that he needs. We all need help.
There are prayers, too, for those still fighting to stay alive. 7 people are in critical condition. 3, including a toddler, are in serious condition. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
U.S. President Donald Trump has marked his first 100 days in office with a campaign-style rally.
And we're here tonight in the heartland of our nation to celebrate the most successful first 100 days of any administration.
Coming up, we're on the ground in Michigan talking with his supporters about his second term. Plus, with the final results in and CBC News projecting a Liberal minority, Rosie and the At Issue panel are here with their key election takeaways. First, though, what some Canadian voters make of the results.
I'm glad he won because I think he's the best person to stand up to Donald Trump.
More of the same probably was less frightening since we have so much change going on everywhere else.
Thought it was time to move on.
It didn't quite go the way maybe planned for most that wanted the change.
It is what it is, we all voted and they chose.
Conservative government was potentially very problematic for middle-class people.
We're following our top story throughout the hour tonight. After a remarkable comeback, Prime Minister Mark Carney was back on the job today in Ottawa, his Liberal Party winning another minority government, a rare 4th consecutive term. Now, one of the major figures during Canada's federal campaign is marking his own 100 days in office. Paul Hunter went to Donald Trump's Michigan rally to speak with supporters about his second term.
USA!
Like so many Donald Trump rallies prior to last year's election, this one's full of MAGA hoopla. But now, 100 days into his second term in the White House, an assessment on Trump before a rally in Michigan commemorating those 100 days, including, for example, the view from Trump supporters on those tariffs, already causing prices to rise in the U.S.
I do believe that the tariffs, it is going to be bumpy for a while, but we have to be patient. This mess has developed for a while, so it's not going to go away in 100 years.
Are you willing to pay higher prices in the short term to get that in the long term?
Yes, I am.
Maybe it's going to be a little rough for us right now, but for my 4 grandkids and the generations after, I believe it will be good for them.
Trump, 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 Trump.
That's the promise of Trump, that his tariffs will force jobs now in other countries back into America. And that includes jobs from Canada and its multi-billion-dollar auto industry. Among those at the rally, supporters known as Auto Workers for Trump. Well aware, Michigan is meant to be the prime beneficiary of Trump's auto tariffs targeting nearby Ontario.
When you look into the future and you look across the river at the giant auto industry in Canada,
right.
What do you think the ultimate...
Most of those are jobs that came from our country and they moved over there. So the vehicles that are being sold in the United States, we want to build them here in the United States. And that's what Trump's trying to do. He's fighting for us, and that's why we support him 100%.
It is a forceful position made even as Trump is now scaling back some aspects of the tariffs for autos, if only temporarily. As for pushback in Canada on Trump's talk of it becoming the 51st state.
You know, Canada needs to pay attention to who they're dealing with. I mean, everything that they have, we make right here at home in America. We don't need them as much as they need us.
Be a little more respectful to Americans, he said, Adrian.
But not all Americans see it that way, Paul.
No, they do not. In fact, recent polls are showing that support for Donald Trump is falling in this country. And I got to say, this was the least attended Trump rally I'd ever been to. And some people were leaving just 30 minutes after he took the stage, Adrian.
All right, Paul Hunter across the border tonight in Detroit. Thanks, Paul. All right, it's time now to dig deeper into the stories shaping our world. Rosie's here with At Issue to break down those election results.
At Issue tonight, Canada's new Liberal government, another minority but a new Prime Minister, and Mark Carney's first speech promised unity to a divided electorate.
My message to every Canadian is this: no matter where you live, no matter what language you speak, no matter how you voted, I will always do my best to represent everyone who calls Canada home.
So what's to be made of last night's result? What will it mean for Canada in the midst of a trade war? I'm Rosemary Barton, here to break it all down. At Issue, Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. We all slept a little bit, and now we have a firm result, a Liberal minority government. They fell short of the majority that they were seeking in those last days of the campaign. How does that complicate things, do you think, Chantal, for the Prime Minister?
Well, unless he looks for a fight, which I don't believe would happen, it doesn't complicate things in the short or midterm. Why? Because the NDP with 7 seats, no leader, and no money, no official party status, is not about to go to a microphone to say, we're going to bring down this government. No. But the Bloc Québécois has also promised a year of support while this negotiation is ongoing. So, and the Conservative Party is missing its best player in the House of Commons for the foreseeable future, at least until next fall, because Mr. Poilievre doesn't have a seat. So up to a point, it is up to Mark Carney to build those bridges and to do whatever he needs to do, but he doesn't need to beg.
No.
Is basically what I'm trying to say.
It was interesting to me that he did have a series of phone calls today, and he called Pierre Poilievre and he called Yves-François Blanchet. And I wondered whether that, Andrew, is a sign that he does understand what he was talking about last night, which was humility and unity.
Yeah, he's in a strong position, of course. We've been here before. This is, what, the 6th minority government in the last 8 elections. And this is what you would call a strong minority government, very close to majority. They can govern with the support of any one of the other opposition parties. They don't have to go to cobble together two of them. And as Chantal said, nobody wants to go in an election at any time, and certainly nobody wants to be seen to be forcing us into election. The public would have zero tolerance for anything of that kind. So while it was becoming of Mr. Carney to speak of humility last night, and as I mentioned last night, he in particular is probably a good person to be talking about that, because if anything, his reputation is the other way. But he's in a very strong position, and as Chantal said, I don't think he's got a whole lot to worry about for the next little while, from internally anyway.
Yeah, Althea.
Well, I guess you need to compare it to what was the situation before. This is a much better House of Commons for the Liberal leader than if he had just continued on with Justin Trudeau's House of Commons, for all the reasons that Chantal and Andrew have outlined. I will say that I think probably we won't see Pierre Poilievre in the House until next year, because it takes an MP would have 30 days after the writ to resign. So one of his MPs, if he were to say run in Alberta, and then the Prime Minister gets to call an election within 6 months. So that's an election in the fall, and then the House doesn't come back till January. So that's quite a long time. The other thing that I don't think New Democrats will be rushing to bring us to the polls is a lot of New Democrats actually elected or helped elect Mark Carney. So they don't want to see this government fall. And so you have all these kind of interests coalescing, trying to ensure that this is at least stable for a short period of time. Like, Conservatives don't want the government to fall within 3 or 6 months either, because they have their own House to deal with. And it's far from clear what's going to happen within that party.
What kind of prime minister? I mean, we saw Mark Carney be a prime minister for, what was it, 11 days or something, and it was yeah, it was really to launch the campaign and to send all sorts of signals and messages about what he was going to do. What kind of prime minister do we expect that he will be, given the kinds of things he said on the campaign, Chantal?
More decisive, more quickly. Also, possibly to the discomfort of many of the Liberals he helped elect. More to the right than the previous government, and certainly more focused on the economy.
Yeah.
Now, will Liberals chafe under that kind of leadership? I don't think so. This is someone who took them from the brink and gave them another government, so they're not going to have a choice. And he has very much control over the party and over the caucus, but I do expect it's going to be a bit different than the Trudeau era.
Yeah, I would agree with the decisiveness factor. That seems to be a characteristic of the prime ministers, the new prime minister. Andrew, what do you think? What do you think what kind of prime minister will he be, or should he be? Would be another way to put it.
Well, we're familiar with U.S. presidents who want to come to office wanting to focus on domestic policy and get consumed by foreign policy. I wonder whether he'll find the opposite case. I think that from the early signals he was giving off, he would like to be very much involved in creating new kinds of diplomatic arrangements, new kinds of economic arrangements, and of course the times very much demand that. But he may find he's got his hands full at home pretty quickly. We talked about he didn't have much to worry about federally, but he's got some provinces who are already knocking on the door, naming no Albertas, that are, promising to make life difficult for him on that front. So yes, I think he's, from what one reads, he certainly is decisive. I think he's got, one of the concerns I have is with him or with anybody like that, and we talked about this last night, the smartest guy in the room syndrome. Obviously, we don't want unintelligent political leaders, but past a certain point, if you're always accustomed to being sort of the answer guy, the person who can run rings around the people around you, it can impair your judgment. Again, we talked about humility. One thing you need is intellectual humility, the ability to understand that maybe I haven't considered every corner and every angle of this question, and maybe I need to listen to that person who isn't as smart as me, but maybe has some useful experience he can draw or she can draw on. And so that'll be an early test, is how well does he play with others?
Althea?
It'd be interesting to see who he decides to put in his real cabinet, because I think that was just a kind of, we needed to scrap that off the task list before the election. What ministers he will actually keep, what newcomers he will elevate. I think one thing that we can't forget is that basically Mark Carney is prime minister because of Quebec. And so there will be a lot of attention paid to Quebec. And Quebec now has, I think, a stronger hand, not just the provincial government, but the MPs as well, to make more demands on Mr. Carney. And so there is a bit of, I would say, even concern within caucus that what they thought they were getting with Mark Carney in terms of a kind of like light progressive conservative may not actually be how he ends up governing. There are concerns that because so many New Democrats lent him their vote, that Quebec has such a strong position that we won't see the identity issues that Mr. Trudeau was concerned with, but that maybe it's not going to be as center-right as some people had expected.
Chantal, last word to you.
Can I just note that the current Quebec government on its second term is right of center by comparison to the federal Liberals. So the notion that Quebec voters are leftists who all voted for Mark Carney is kind of hard to sustain looking at the CAQ as the government in the province. It's a bit more complicated than that. And as for the identity issue, there's an election coming in Quebec, yes.
Yeah.
But people who are not on the sovereignist side did note the big decline in Bloc support, but also the fact that the PQ leader spent the day telling Yves-François Blanchet he ran the wrong campaign. So I'm not convinced that the vote that came to Mark Carney from Quebec was based on the notion that suddenly he would go into identity politics.
Well, that's not what I'm saying. I just mean that there's a coalition here. There are New Democrats who lent Mark Carney their votes across the country, in Alberta, for example. And then there are Quebecers who, in large numbers, voted for Mr. Carney, and he cannot ignore that.
Yeah, there'll be expectations from Quebec.
And that is why they elect majority CAQ governments that are right of center. The same voters.
Yeah,
right?
Quickly, Andrew.
So let's be careful with the characterization of Quebec voters as these leftists coming to storm Parliament Hill with NDP voters who went to the Liberals.
Okay, 20 seconds, Andrew.
Just very quickly, the temptation will be to try to deliver some kind of knockout blow to the NDP, to lock up that vote, to forever lock them down. And if he expends too much capital in that and moves too far to the left in that pursuit, he may find himself disappointed. There is a tribalism to Canadian politics, a party identification, a party loyalty that goes beyond reason, goes beyond ideology. And I think he really needs to be careful of that.
I think the point Althea was making, though, was that Quebecers will have expectations of Mark Carney, not that they're progressive or center-right, that they will expect. But just back to that point, that they will expect things from him, given that they are the ones that gave him.
By and large, did not wanted someone to deal with Trump and did not want Pierre Poilievre, the only province where he was never popular.
Okay.
And unless you factor that in and make it a big, we're expecting great things to happen, you haven't read this place right.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. When we come back, we will talk about Pierre Poilievre and what comes next for him. One opposition leader stepping down, another losing his own riding. How is all of this going to shake down? That's next. Welcome back. Last night's race was a tight contest. Final results not coming until this afternoon, but the future of two opposition parties in question and perhaps two leaders. Jagmeet Singh has announced he's resigning after losing his seat. Pierre Poilievre also lost his riding in Carleton. So what comes next for him? Chantal, Andrew, and Althea. Althea, I'll start with you. What are you hearing about whether Pierre Poilievre can stay on as leader, where he might run? What are we hearing about the likelihood of him?
I don't know where he might run. I would suspect that he probably would pick an Alberta seat, but it will depend who volunteers to give up their seat. But he intends to fight. I mean, he made it clear to us publicly, and MPs I've spoken to believe that he absolutely intends to stay. Somebody did mention to me, Andrew Scheer and Aaron O'Toole also thought that they could stay, and that did not work out the way that they expected. So just because you want to stay doesn't mean that they will allow you to stay. I think he has a firm grasp on the party apparatus and on the membership base, because basically these are the people that helped choose him as leader in 2022. It's not yet clear to me what the caucus wants. We have a whole bunch of new MPs, many of whom are much further to the right. You have a lot of progressive conservatives that are still in this caucus that don't necessarily, describe themselves publicly that way, but are more centrist and are very uncomfortable with the way Mr. Poilievre has been running things for the last few years. So will they take advantage to kind of demand change? The other question is really, how much change do they want? As far as I know, there is nobody in the wings within that caucus trying to take over his job. And that's probably the thing that will save him, because he was agitating in the wings to take over Aaron O'Toole's job. And there is no such player that I can see at the moment.
Chantal?
The history of leaders who want to stay and are unseated is that they are unseated from the outside. And not from within caucus. And that is what happened. Jean Chrétien was on the outside when he got the better of John Turner. And so was Brian Mulroney when he got the better of Joe Clark. So if you're going to look for challenges and people who operate on that basis, look outside. And for some reason, I don't know why, the name Mulroney comes to mind. A different generation. But beyond that, Mr. Poilievre has been running his caucus with a stick because he held carrots. And those carrots were cabinet seats, appointments when the government became conservative. He's lost all of those carrots, and that stick won't work. So he is going to have to adjust big time to a new situation, one he has never had to put up with since he's become leader, and I'm not sure how he does that.
Andrew?
People will put up with ideological differences. They'll put up even with personal humiliation if they think you're a winner.
Yep.
Mr. Poilievre did the best he could on the election night to point out, yes, they've made some gains in seats. Yes, they had a higher popular vote than before. These are the arguments you make when you lose an election. And I think, once the smoke is cleared, it's going to dawn on people that this election they thought they had in the bag was lost, that the reason they lost it had a lot to do with the unpopularity of the leader and with the strategy that the leader endorsed. So is he safe for the short term? Probably. I imagine Jenny Byrne may not be long for this world politically. And in the long run, he is weakened by this for the reasons we've been talking about. I think at some point people start to exploit that. I was struck by, on the night, the two-track message that came out of the Conservatives. One was Mr. Poilievre giving that lovely statesman-like speech, and the other was Jamil Javani declaring holy war on Doug Ford at great length, which I suspect was neither spontaneous nor unauthorized. People have ideological differences within the party. Those are fissures within the party, but there's also just pure sort of warlordism, and people will not have taken kindly to that kind of attack. And let us remember also, it's not just Doug Ford that he's at war with. It's Tim Houston in Nova Scotia. It's the Red Tories. It's some of the SoCons. He's built up a lot of enmities that he could afford to roll over or ignore when everything was running his way. But as Chantal said, when things aren't running your way so much, then some of that starts to come due.
Okay, I got to leave it there for our Tuesday edition. We're still doing a Thursday edition, I regret to inform you, so I'll see you in a couple of days. Thank you all for that, and with that, I'll send things back to Adrian.
You bet. Thanks, Rosie. Up next, the view from voters after the Liberals' stunning turnaround.
I'm very happy with the way it went.
I think we're in big trouble.
How Canadians are digesting the results. Next. After a 36-day campaign that came down to a fierce battle between two parties, tonight there is just a lot to process for voters across this country. So before we go, we wanted to share a bit more of how people are feeling about this consequential election, because for this country, this election is a real moment.
I wanted the Conservatives to win. I wanted Pierre Poilievre to win. I'm not quite sure why Canadians voted that way.
Honestly, I did vote Liberal just because I was a little scared to vote Conservative because I don't know how it's going to end up. So I just went with the safe one.
I don't think they won as they expected, but I hope that with this we will have a stability and strength to fight the threat that is coming toward Canada.
I'm very happy with the way it went. We need someone smart, that can make good deals for Canada, stand up to Trump.
There's a lot of change and I'm excited for it.
I think we need to keep an open mind.
And I think we're in big trouble. I think we'll be back at the polls in a year's time. I honestly don't think this is sustainable.
I voted Liberal in this election as like a strategic vote. Is it what I want long term? No, but again, politics is like riding the bus. You know, you're not looking for the perfect route. You're just trying to get as close as you can get there. So for me, this is the bus I'm happy to be on.
Thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to the National's YouTube channel. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.